The rain was falling outside, in a soft, steady rhythm. It was the kind of gentle rain that makes a small house feel like the safest place in the entire world. Inside, the soft yellow glow of the living room lamp cast a warm light over our old wooden coffee table. My little girl and I were sitting on the floor, our shoulders pressed together. We were entirely focused on the coloring book laid out between us. She had specifically chosen the brightest, most vibrant green crayon for the little vegetable garden we were drawing, and she used a calm, watery blue for the tiny fish pond right next to it. It was a simple picture, but to us, it was a blueprint of the life we were trying so hard to build, a life of quiet freedom, far away from the exhausting chaos of the past. She was humming a sweet little melody under her breath, her tiny hand moving carefully and deliberately across the paper. I remember looking down at her and feeling this overwhelming, profound sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in a very long time, I actually felt like I had finally created a true sanctuary for her. I felt like we were finally safe. But then, out of absolutely nowhere, that fragile peace was violently shattered. A loud, aggressive pounding on the front door echoed like a gunshot through our tiny house. It wasn't just a normal knock, it was the unmistakable sound of raw anger. It was the sound of someone demanding to be let in, demanding to take control. The heavy, rhythmic thuds seemed to rattle the very walls of our safe haven, vibrating through the floorboards. My daughter physically jumped, her green crayon snapping in half against the paper, her small shoulders hunched up instantly, shrinking her body down. She looked toward the door, her beautiful eyes suddenly wide with a heartbreaking, pure panic. And then, she immediately scrambled backward, pressing her tiny, trembling body hard against my side. She buried her face in my arm, trying to hide from whatever monster was waiting outside in the dark. Seeing that look of sheer terror in her innocent eyes tore my heart into 1,000 jagged pieces, because I knew exactly what that knock meant, and I knew exactly who was standing on the other side of that door. It was the ghost of a broken, toxic past that simply refused to let our little family go. It was my ex-wife's family. They had always been like a storm of chaos, thriving on drama, manipulation, and endless demands. They didn't come to visit out of love or concern. They came because they felt entitled to my peace, my energy, and whatever little money I had managed to save for my daughter's future. They had somehow found out where we moved, and they brought the thunderstorm right to our front steps. In the old days, a knock like that would have triggered a massive spike of adrenaline and fury inside me. I would have thrown the door wide open, raised my voice, and fought back with everything I had. I would have matched their toxic anger con my own blinding rage, trying to defend my honor and my space. I would have let them drag me right back down into the mud where they lived, and they knew that. The people pounding on my door right now firmly believed that the darkness of the night, the sudden shock, and the psychological pressure would break me. They thought the fear of causing a scene in a new neighborhood would force me to compromise. They fully expected me to open the door, hand over whatever cash they were demanding this time, and beg them to just leave us alone. They thought my silence over the past year was a sign of weakness, but they were dead wrong. As I sat there on the floor, feeling my daughter trembling against my ribs, a massive storm of anger did rise up in my chest. My blood was boiling, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to go out there and destroy the threat. But I forced my jaw to unclench. I took a slow, deep breath, swallowing the rage completely. I knew that any angry shout, any violent movement from me right now, would be permanently carved into my daughter's delicate memory. I refused to let her associate her father with violence, fear, or screaming matches in the middle of the night. I would not let them turn my home into a battlefield. I looked down at my little girl and forced the warmest, most reassuring smile I could muster onto my face. I gently stroked her hair, letting my calm heartbeat soothe her panic. I reached over to the table and picked up my phone and a pair of small, comfortable headphones. I put on a playlist of soft, acoustic guitar music, the kind she always loved listening to before bed. I carefully placed the headphones over her little ears, adjusting them so they fit perfectly. I leaned in close, looking directly into her wide, frightened eyes. I whispered to her with absolute, unwavering confidence, "Close your eyes for a minute, sweetie. Listen to the music, and try to count how many stars you can see in your imagination. Daddy just needs to step outside to check on the rain, and I will be right back." She nodded slowly, squeezing her eyes shut, as the gentle music blocked out the harsh reality of the world. I stood up, and the moment I turned my back to her, my smile vanished entirely. My face hardened into cold, impenetrable stone. I walked toward the front door, every step deliberate and heavy with purpose. I unlocked the deadbolt and stepped out into the freezing, pouring rain on the front porch. I didn't leave the door wide open for them to look inside. I stepped through and immediately pulled the heavy wooden door shut behind me, leaving it only a tiny fraction of an inch ajar so I could hear, but blocking their view completely. I placed my back firmly against the wood. I used my own body, my own broad shoulders, as a literal wall of flesh and bone, to shield the innocence inside from the toxicity outside. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something important. If you are also standing alone right now in the freezing storms of life, doing everything in your power to protect the ones you love most, please leave the word steadfast in the comments below. I swore to the heavens and to my own soul that I would use my entire life and these tired shoulders as a steel shield. I promised to sweep away all the shadows of fear around my child, to give her the absolute most peaceful sky imaginable. If you believe in the resilient, quiet, and unbreakable power of a father's love, please hit that subscribe button right now. Join our community so we can share this strength and stand tall with each other every single day. The freezing rain hit my face the exact second I stepped outside, stinging my skin like icy needles. Standing at the bottom of my porch steps were two people who had made it their absolute life's mission to ensure I never found peace. It was my ex-wife's older brother and her new husband. They looked completely ridiculous, standing there soaked to the bone and shivering in the cold, but their eyes were burning with that same familiar, toxic entitlement they always carried. They immediately started shouting over the deafening sound of the pouring rain. They called me a coward for hiding inside my house. They called me every single degrading name they could possibly think of to try and provoke a reaction. They aggressively demanded a ridiculous sum of money. They falsely claimed I owed them for some fabricated past grievance. They threatened to start smashing the windows of my house if I didn't pay up right then and there. They threatened to wake up the entire neighborhood and tell everyone on the street what a terrible, deadbeat father I supposedly was. They were throwing every single psychological weapon they had at me, fully expecting me to crack under the immense pressure. They were waiting for me to yell back, to throw a punch, to completely lose my temper. They wanted me to do something they could use against me in family court, but I just stood there on the porch, perfectly still. I didn't cross my arms in a defensive posture. I didn't clench my fists preparing for a physical fight. I just looked down at them, with absolutely empty, emotionless eyes. I let them scream until they literally started running out of breath, their chests heaving in the cold air. I let their chaotic energy crash against me, like ocean waves hitting a solid, immovable cliff. And when they finally paused, panting and waiting for my furious reaction, I spoke. I didn't raise my voice even a fraction of an inch. I kept my tone incredibly low, steady, and completely devoid of any emotion. I told them that they had exactly 10 seconds to get off my property before the police arrived. I calmly explained that every single word they just screamed and every aggressive move they just made was currently being recorded. I slowly pointed up to the small, blinking red light hidden in the dark corner of the porch ceiling. It was a security camera they had been too completely blind with rage to notice. I told them that I had a restraining order drafted and ready to be officially filed by my lawyer the very next morning at 8 o'clock sharp. And then I leaned slightly forward and delivered the final, crushing blow. I told them that this porch was a boundary they would never, ever cross again, because the broken man they used to manipulate and control was dead and gone. "You want a war?" I whispered, my voice cutting cleanly through the sound of the rain. "Bring it to a courtroom, in front of a judge. But if you ever bring your toxic garbage near my daughter's peace again, I will legally bury you so deep you will never recover." I stood perfectly still and watched the realization slowly wash over their wet faces. The brother took an involuntary step back, his arrogant, confident smirk completely wiped away. They suddenly realized they had absolutely zero leverage. They realized that all their loud noise and aggressive posturing meant absolutely nothing to a man who had already conquered his own worst inner demons. They muttered a few more pathetic, empty curses under their breath, but the fire in their eyes was completely extinguished. They turned around, got into their rusted car, and drove away, disappearing permanently into the dark, miserable rain. How do you protect the pure, innocent psychology of a young child when dealing with the incredibly toxic, unnecessary conflicts of adults after a broken marriage? Please share your concise, civilized thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Lord, please grant me the wisdom to gracefully face adversity and the gentle patience to heal any small scratches in my child's heart. If your heart wants to walk this challenging but beautiful journey with us, please hit that subscribe button right now. I stood there on the porch for a very long time. After the red glow of their taillights faded down the street, the massive spike of adrenaline was finally starting to wear off, leaving my legs feeling heavy and my hands shaking just a little bit. I closed my eyes and took a massive, deep breath of the freezing night air, filling my lungs with the pure cold. I let the heavy rain wash completely over my face. I deliberately used it to wash away all the tension, the lingering anger, and the toxic energy they had brought to my doorstep. I aggressively wiped my face dry. With the rough palms of my hands, I took one final, grounding breath, leaving the fiercely protective monster I had to be out there in the cold dark. And then I turned the brass handle and gently pushed the heavy front door open. The exact moment I stepped back inside, the warm yellow light of our living room embraced me like a comforting hug. The house smelled like fresh crayons and old, comforting wood. It felt like absolute heaven. I walked quietly across the floorboards, back over to the small coffee table. My beautiful little girl was still sitting on the floor, still wearing the oversized headphones, but she wasn't counting imaginary stars anymore. She was completely, deeply fast asleep. Her breathing was incredibly slow, soft, and perfectly even. Her small head was resting peacefully on her tiny arms, right next to the vibrant green garden she had just finished coloring. There was not a single trace of fear left anywhere on her angelic face. The ugly storm outside had raged and screamed, but the monsters had never crossed the threshold of her sanctuary. I knelt down and gently slid the headphones off her small ears. I carefully scooped her up in my arms, holding her warm, soft, heavy weight securely against my chest. She shifted slightly in her sleep, completely instinctively burying her face deep into my shoulder. She was completely safe, completely oblivious to the bitter war I had just fought to protect her world. I carried her slowly down the hallway to her bedroom and laid her down gently on her soft mattress. I pulled her favorite heavy blanket up to her chin, making absolutely sure she was perfectly warm and comfortable. I stood quietly in the doorway of her room for a very long time, just watching her chest rise and fall as she slept. And in that profoundly quiet, peaceful moment, I realized something I will never forget. A father's greatest strength is never, ever found in how loud he can yell, or how fiercely he can fight the world. It is found entirely in his ability to be the quiet, immovable, unbreakable wall between his child's innocent heart and the terrifying darkness of the outside world. The storms outside this house will eventually pass, but the pure love inside these walls will stay warm forever. Please leave a kind word of encouragement in the comments to give us the strength to keep walking this steadfast path.